Chapter 1. What happens to love after the wedding? The questions that thousands of married and divorced persons are asking today. Some are asking friends, some are asking counselors and clergy, and some are asking themselves. Sometimes the answers are couched in psychological research jargon that is almost incomprehensible. Sometimes they're couched in humor and folklore. Most of the jokes and pithy sayings contain some truth, but they are like offering an aspirin to a person with cancer. The desire for romantic love and marriage is deeply rooted in our psychological makeup. Books are bound on the subject, television or radio talk shows deal with it. The internet is full of advice. So, are our parents and friends keeping love alive in our marriages as serious business? With all the help available for media experts, why is it that so few couples seem to have found the secret to keeping love alive after the wedding? Why is it that a couple can attend a communication workshop, hear wonderful ideas on how to enhance communication, return home and find themselves totally unable to implement the communication patterns demonstrated? How is it that we see an expert on Oprah share tips on 101 ways to express love to your spouse, we select 2 or 3 ways that seem to be especially good us? Try them and our spouse doesn't even acknowledge our effort. We give up on the other 98 ways and go back to life as usual. In the area of love, it is similar. Your emotional love language and the language of your spouse may be as different as Chinese from English. No matter how hard you try to express love in English, if your spouse understands only Chinese, you will never understand how to love each other. My friend on the plane was speaking the language of affirming words to his third wife when he said, "I told her how beautiful she was. I told her how I loved her. I told her how proud I was to be your husband." He was speaking love and he was sincere, but she did not understand his language. Perhaps she was looking for love in his behavior and didn't see it. Being sincere is not enough. We must be willing to learn our spouse's primary love language if we are to be effective communicators of love. My conclusion after 30 years of marriage counseling is that there are 5 emotional love languages. 5 ways that people speak and understand emotional love in the field of linguistics, and language may have numerous dialects or variations. Similarly, within the 5 basic emotional love languages, in my opinion, there are only 5. However, there may be numerous dialects. The number of ways to express love within a love language is limited only by one's imagination. The important thing is to speak the love language of your spouse. Chapter 2. Keeping the love tank full. Love is the most important word in the English language and the most confusing. Both secular and religious thinkers agree that love plays a central role in life. Thousands of books, songs, magazines and movies are peppered with the love with the word. Numerous philosophical and theological systems have made a prominent place for love. Psychologists have concluded that the need to feel loved is a primary human emotional need. For love, we will climb mountains, cross seas, traverse desert sands and endure untold hardships. Without love, mountains become unclimbable seas, uncrossable deserts unbearable, and hardships are lot in life. I liked the metaphor the first time I heard it. Inside every child is an emotional tank waiting to be filled with love. When a child really feels loved, he will develop normally, but when the love tank is empty, the child will misbehave. Much of the misbehavior of children is motivated by the cravings of an empty love tank. I was listening to Dr. Ross Campbell, a psychiatrist who specializes in the treatment of children and adolescents. As I listened, I thought of the hundreds of parents who had paraded the misdeeds of their children through my office. I had never visualized an empty love tank inside those children, but I had certainly seen the results of it. Their misbehavior was a misguided search for the love they did not feel. They were seeking love in all the wrong places and in all the wrong ways. The need to feel loved by one spouse is at the heart of marital desires. A man said to me recently, "What good is the house, the cars, the place at the beach, or any of the rest of it, if your wife doesn't love you?" Do you understand what he was really saying? More than anything, I want to be loved by my wife. Our cry for love. Something in our nature cries out to be loved by another. Isolation is devastating to the human psyche. That is why solitary confinement is considered the cruelest of punishments. Running your marriage on an empty love tank may cost you even more than trying to drive your car without oil. What you're about to hear has the potential of saving thousands of marriages and can even enhance the emotional climate of a good marriage. Whatever the quality of your marriage now, it can always be better. Warning: understanding the 5 love languages and learning to speak the primary love language of your spouse may radically affect his or her behavior. People behave differently when their emotional love tanks are full. Chapter 3. Falling in love. Most of us enter marriage by way of the in-love experience. We meet someone whose physical characteristics and personality traits create enough electrical shock to trigger our love alert system, the bells go off, and we set in motion the process of getting to know the person. The first step may be sharing a hamburger steak depending on our budget, but our real interest is not in the food. We are on a quest to discover love. Could this warm, tingly feeling I have inside be the real thing? Eventually, we are convinced that it is the real thing. And we tell the other person, hoping the feeling is reciprocal. If it isn't, things cool off a bit. Or we redouble our efforts to impress, and eventually, when the love of our beloved, when it is reciprocal, we start talking about marriage because everyone agrees that being in love is the necessary foundation for a good marriage. The anteroom of heaven. At its peak, the in-love experience is euphoric. We are emotionally obsessed with each other. We go to sleep thinking about one another. When we rise, that person's the first thought on our minds. We long to be together. Spending time together is like playing in the anteroom with heaven. When we hold hands, it seems as if our blood flows together. We could kiss forever if we didn't have to go to school or work. Embracing sparks dreams of marriage and ecstasy. Unfortunately, the eternality of the in-love experience is fiction, not fact. The late psychologist Dr. Dorothy Tennant conducted long-range studies on the in-love phenomenon. After studying scores of couples, she concluded that the average lifespan of a romantic obsession is 2 years. If it is a secretive love affair, it may last a little longer. Eventually, however, we all descend from the clouds and plant our feet on earth again. Our eyes are opened, and we see the warts of the other person. Her quirks are now merely annoying. He shows a capacity for hurt and anger, perhaps even harsh words and critical judgments. Those little traits that we overlooked when we were in love now become huge mountains. Reality intrudes. Welcome to the real world of marriage, where hairs are always on the sink and little light spots cover the mirror, where arguments center on which way the toilet paper comes off and whether the lid should be up or down. It is a world where shoes do not walk to the closet and drawers do not close themselves. Where coats do not like hangers and socks go AWOL during laundry. In this world, a look can hurt and a word can crush. Intimate lovers can become enemies and marriage a battlefield. She would like to visit her parents, but he says, I don't like spending so much time with your family. Little by little, the illusion of intimacy evaporates and the individual desires, emotions, thoughts and behavior patterns assert themselves. Some couples believe that the end of the in-love experience means that they have only 2 options: resign themselves to a life of misery with their spouse, or jump ship and try again. Our generation has opted for the latter, whereas an earlier generation often chose the former. Before we automatically conclude that we have made the better choice, perhaps we should examine the data. According to a substantial body of research, the divorce rate for second marriages is at least 60% and rises when children are involved. Research seems to indicate that there is a third and better alternative. We can recognize the in-love experience for what it is: a temporary emotional high, and now pursue real love with our spouse. That kind of love is emotional in nature, but not obsessional. We cannot take credit for the kind of generous things we do while under the influence of the obsession. We are pushed and carried along by an instinctual force that goes beyond our normal behavior patterns. But if once we return to the real world of human choice, we choose to be kind and generous, that is real love. When your spouse's emotional love tank is full, and he feels secure in your love, the whole world looks bright, and your spouse will move out to reach his highest potential in life. But when the love tank is empty, and he feels used but not loved, the whole world looks dark, and he will likely never reach his potential for good in the world. In the next 5 chapters, I will explain the 5 emotional love languages, and then in chapter 9, illustrate how discovering your spouse's primary love language can make your efforts at love most productive. Chapter 4. Love language number 1. Words of affirmation. Mark Twain once said, "I can live for 2 months on a good compliment." If we take Twain literally, 6 compliments a year would keep his emotional love tank at the operational level. Your spouse will probably need more. One way to express love emotionally is to use words that build up. Encouraging words. Giving verbal compliment is only one way to express words of affirmation to your spouse. Another dialect is encouraging words. The word encourage means to inspire courage. All of us have areas in which we feel insecure. We lack courage, and that lack of courage often hinders us from accomplishing the positive things that we would like to do. The latent potential within your spouse in his or her areas of insecurity may await your encouraging words. Perhaps your spouse has untapped potential in one or more areas of life. That potential may be awaiting your encouraging words. Perhaps he needs to enroll in a course to develop that potential. Maybe he needs to meet some people who have succeeded in that area, who can give him insight on the next step he needs to take. Your words may give your spouse the courage necessary to take the first step. Encouragement requires empathy and seeing the world from your spouse's perspective. We must first learn what is important to our spouse. Only then can we give encouragement with verbal encouragement we are trying to communicate. I know, I care. I'm with you. How can I help? We're trying to show that we believe in him and his abilities. We are giving credit and praise. Most of us have more potential than we will ever develop. What holds us back is often a lack of courage. The loving spouse can supply that all-important catalyst. Of course, encouraging words may be difficult for you to speak. It may not be your primary love language. It may take great effort for you to learn the second language. That will be especially true if you have a pattern of critical or condemning words, but I can assure you that it will be worth the effort. Kind words, love is kind. If then we are to communicate love verbally, we must use kind words. That has to do with the way we speak. The same sentence can have 2 different meanings depending on how you say it. The statement I love you do when said with kindness and tenderness can be a genuine expression of love. But what about I love you? The question mark changes the whole meaning of those 3 words. Sometimes our words say one thing, but our tone of voice says another. We are sending double messages. Our spouse will usually interpret our message based on our tone of voice, not the words we use. The manner in which we speak is exceedingly important. An ancient sage once said, a soft answer turns away anger. When your spouse is angry and upset and lashing out with words of heat. If you choose to be loving, you will not reciprocate with additional heat, but with a soft voice. You will receive what he is saying as information about his emotional feelings. You will let him tell you of his hurt, anger and perception of events. You will seek to put yourself in his shoes and see the event through his eyes, and then express softly and kindly your understanding of why he feels that way. If you have wronged him, you will be willing to confess the wrong and ask forgiveness. If your motivation is different from what he is reading, you will be able to explain your motivation kindly. You will seek understanding and reconciliation, and not to prove your own perception as the only logical way to interpret what has happened. That is mature love, love to which we aspire if we seek a growing marriage. I am amazed at how many individuals mess up every new day with yesterday. They insist on bringing into today the failures of yesterday. And in so doing, they pollute a potentially wonderful day. I can't believe you did it. I don't think I'll ever forget it. You can't possibly know how much you hurt me. I don't know how you can sit there so smugly after you treated me that way. You ought to be crawling on your knees, begging me for forgiveness. I don't know if I can ever forgive you. Those are not the words of love, but a bitterness and resentment and revenge. The best thing we can do with the failures of the past is to let them be history. Yes, it happened. Certainly, it hurt. And it may still hurt, but he has acknowledged his failure and asked your forgiveness. We cannot erase the past, but we can accept it as history. We can choose to live today free from the failures of yesterday. Forgiveness is not a feeling, it is a commitment. It is a choice to show mercy, not to hold the offense up against the offender. Forgiveness is an expression of love, humble words. Love makes requests, not demands. When I demand something from my spouse, I become a parent and see the child. It is the parent who tells the 3-year-old what he ought to do, and in fact what he must do. That is necessary because the 3-year-old does not yet know how to navigate in the treacherous waters of life. In marriage, however, we are equal adult partners. We are not perfect to be sure, but we are adults, and we are partners. If we are to develop an intimate relationship, we need to know each other's desires. If we wish to love each other, we need to know what the other person wants. The way we express those desires, however, is all important. If they come across as demands, we have erased the possibility of intimacy and will drive our spouse away. If, however, we make our needs and desires known in the form of a request, we are giving guidance, not ultimatums. More ways to affirm. Words of affirmation is one of the 5 basic love languages within that language. However, there are many dialects. We have discussed a few already, and there are many more. Entire volumes and numerous articles have been written on these dialects. All of the dialects have in common the use of words to affirm one's spouse. Psychologist William James said that possibly the deepest human need is the need to feel appreciated. If your spouse's love language is words of affirmation, I want to give you some suggestions. Number 1, to remind yourself that words of affirmation is your spouse's primary love language. Print the following on a 3x5 card and put it on a mirror or other place where you will see it daily. Words are important. Write it 3 times. Number 2, for 1 week, keep a written record of all the words of affirmation you give your spouse each day. Number 3, set a goal to give your spouse a different compliment each day for 1 month. Number 4, as you watch TV, read, or listen to people's conversations, look for words of affirmation that people use. Write those affirming statements in a notebook or keep them electronically. Number 5, write a love letter, a love paragraph or a love sentence to your spouse and give it quietly or with fanfare. You may someday find your love letter tucked away in some special place. Number 6, compliment your spouse in the presence of his parents or friends. Number 7, look for your spouse's strengths and tell her how much you appreciate those strengths. Number 8, tell your children how great their mother or father is. Do this behind your spouse's back and in her presence. Chapter 5. Love language number 2, quality time. When I say with my wife and give her 20 minutes of my undivided attention, and she does the same for me, we are giving each other 20 minutes of life. We will never have those 20 minutes again. We are giving our lives to each other. It is a powerful emotional communicator of love. Spend time talking with the children about their school experiences. Spend time playing games with the children, go on a picnic with her and the children on Saturday, and don't complain about the ants and the flies. Take a vacation with the family at least once a year. Go walking with her and talk as we walk. Focused attention. It isn't enough to just be in the same room with someone. The key ingredient in giving your spouse quality time is giving them focused attention, especially in this era of many distractions. Quality time does not mean that we have to spend hours together moments gazing into each other's eyes. It means that we are doing something together and that we are giving our full attention to the other person. The activity in which we are both engaged is incidental. The important thing emotionally is that we are spending focused time with each other. The activity is a vehicle that creates the sense of togetherness. Quality conversation, like words of affirmation, the language of quality time also has many dialects. One of the most common dialects is that a quality conversation. By quality conversation I mean sympathetic dialogue or 2 individuals are sharing their experiences, thoughts, feelings and desires in a friendly, uninterrupted context. Quality conversation is quite different from the first love language. Words of affirmation focus on what we are saying, whereas quality conversation focuses on what we are hearing. Most of us have little training in listening. We are far more efficient in thinking and speaking. Learning to listen may be as difficult as learning a foreign language, but learn we must if we want to communicate love. That is especially true if your spouse's primary love language is quality time and his or her dialect is quality conversation. I will not seek to repeat what he's written elsewhere, but suggest the following summary of practical tips. Number 1, maintain eye contact when your spouse is talking. Number 2, don't listen to your spouse and do something else at the same time. Number 3, listen for feelings. Ask yourself, what emotion is my spouse experiencing? Number 5, refuse to interrupt. Learning to talk. Quality conversation requires not only sympathetic listening, but also self-revelation. When a wife says I wish my husband would talk and never know what he's thinking or feeling, she is pleading for intimacy. She wants to feel close to her husband, but how can she feel close to someone whom she doesn't know? Quality activities. In addition to the basic love language of quality time, or giving your spouse your undivided attention, there's another dialect called quality activities. Quality activities may include such things as putting in a garden, visiting historic neighborhoods, shopping for antiques, going to a concert, taking long walks, or having another couple over for soup and bread. If your spouse's love language is quality time, let me give some suggestions. Number 1, take a walk together through the old neighborhood where one of you grew up. Number 2, go to the city park and rent bicycles. Number 3, ask your spouse for a list of 5 activities that he would enjoy doing with you. Number 4, ask your spouse where she most enjoys sitting when talking with you. Number 5, think of an activity your spouse enjoys. Number 6, plan a weekend getaway just for the two of you sometime within the next 6 months. Number 7, make time every day to share with each other some of the events of the day. Number 8, have a let's review our history evening once every 3 months. Number 9, camp out in the living room. Spread your blankets and pillows on the floor. Add your Pepsi and popcorn. Pretend the TV is broken and talk like you used to when you were dating. Chapter 6. Love language number 3. Receiving gifts. Could it be that gift giving is a fundamental expression of love that transcends cultural barriers? Is the attitude of love always accompanied by the concept of giving a gift is something you can hold in your hand and say, "Look, he was thinking of me," or "She remembered me." Mothers remember the days their children bring a flower from the yard as a gift. Visual symbols of love are more important to some people than to others. That's why individuals have different attitudes toward wedding rings. Some never take the ring off after the wedding. Others don't even wear a wedding band. That is another sign that people have different primary love languages. If receiving gifts is my primary love language, I will place great value on the ring you have given me, and I will wear it with great pride. I will also be greatly moved emotionally by other gifts that you give through the years. I will see them as expressions of love. Without gifts as visual symbols, I may question your love. Gifts come in all sizes, colors and shapes. Some are expensive, and others are free. To the individual whose primary love language is receiving gifts, the cost of the gift will matter little, unless it is greatly out of line with what you can afford. If a millionaire gives only $1 gifts regularly, the spouse may question whether that is an expression of love. But when family finances are limited, a $1 gift may speak $1 million worth of love. Gifts may be purchased, found or made. The husband who finds an interesting bird feather while out jogging and brings it home to his wife has found himself an expression of love. Unless of course his wife is allergic to feathers. For the man who can afford it, you can purchase a beautiful card for less than $5. For the man who cannot, you can make one for free. Get the paper out the trash can where you work, fold it in the middle, take scissors and cut out a heart. Write, "I love you" and sign your name. Gifts need not be expensive. But one of the people who says I'm not a gift giver. I didn't receive many gifts growing up. I never learned how to select gifts. It doesn't come naturally for me. Congratulations. You have just made the first discovery in becoming a great lover. You and your spouse speak different love languages. Now that you've made that discovery, get on with the business of learning your second language. If your spouse's primary love language is receiving gifts, you can become a proficient gift giver. In fact, it is one of the easiest languages to learn. The best investment. If you are to become an effective gift giver, you may have to change your attitude about money. Each of us has an individualized perception of the purposes of money, and we have various emotions associated with spending it. Some of us have a spending orientation. We feel good about ourselves when we are spending money. Others have a saving and investing perspective. We feel good about ourselves when we are saving money and investing it wisely. If you are a spender, you will have little difficulty purchasing gifts for your spouse. But if you are a saver, you will experience emotional resistance to the idea of spending money as an expression of love. You don't purchase things for yourself. Why should you purchase things for your spouse? But that attitude fails to recognize that you are purchasing things for yourself. By saving and investing money, you are purchasing self-worth and emotional security. You are caring for your own emotional needs in the way you handle money. If your spouse's love language is receiving gifts, let me share some suggestions. Number 1, try a parade of gifts. Leave a box of candy for your spouse in the morning. Have flowers delivered in the afternoon. Give them the gift in the evening. And when your spouse says what is going on, you respond, just trying to fill your love tank. Number 2, let nature be your guide. The next time you take a walk through the neighborhood, keep your eyes open for a gift for your spouse. It may be a stone, a stick, or a feather. You may even attach special meaning to your natural gift. Number 3, discover the value of homemade originals. Make a gift for your spouse. This may require you to enroll in a class: ceramic, silversmithing, painting, wood carving, and so forth. Number 4, give your spouse a gift every day for 1 week. It may not be a special week just anyway, I promise you it will become the week that was. Number 5. Keep a gift idea notebook. Number 6, enlist a personal shopper. If you really don't have a clue as to how to select a gift for your spouse, ask a friend or family member who knows your wife or husband well to help you. Number 7, offer the gift of presents. Say to your spouse, I want to offer you the gift of my presence at any event or on any occasion that you would like this month. 8. Give your spouse a book and agree to read it yourself. Number 9, give a lasting tribute. Number 10. Give a living gift, purchase and plant a tree or flowering shrub in honor of your spouse. Chapter 7. Love language. Number 4. Acts of service. Can a couple make it in a marriage if they disagree on everything? It was one of those theoretical questions that I knew had a personal root, and no one likes to be forced to do anything. In fact, love is always freely given. Love cannot be demanded. We can request things of each other, but we must never demand anything. Request give direction to love, but demand stop the flow of love. Before we leave Mark and Mary, I would like to make 3 other observations. First, they illustrate clearly that what we do for each other before marriage is no indication of what we will do after marriage. Before marriage, we're carried along by the force of the in-love obsession. After marriage, we revert to being the people we were before we fell in love. Our actions are influenced by the model of our parents, our own personality, our perceptions of love, our emotions, needs, and desires. Only one thing is certain about our behavior: it will not be the same behavior we exhibited when we were caught up in being in love. That leads me to the second: true love is a choice and cannot be coerced. Criticism and demands tend to drive wedges. With enough criticism, you may get acquiescence from your spouse. He may do what you want, but probably it will not be an expression of love. You can give guidance to love by making request. I wish you would wash the car, change the baby's diaper, mow the grass, but you cannot create the will to love. There is a third truth which only the material lover will be able to hear. My spouse has criticisms about my behavior. Provide me with the clearest clue of her primary love language. People tend to criticize their spouse most loudly in the area where they themselves have the deepest emotional need. Their criticism is an ineffective way of pleading for love. Learning the love language of acts of service or require some of us to re-examine our stereotypes of the roles of husbands and wives. Is it really that simple? Simple? Yes. Easy? No, if your spouse's love language is acts of service. Let me give you some suggestions. Number 1, make a list of all the requests your spouse has made of you over the past few weeks. Select one of these each week and do it as an expression of love. Number 2, print note cards with the following: Today, I will show my love for you by. Number 3. Ask your spouse to make a list of 10 things he or she would like for you to do during the next month. Number 4, while your spouse is away, get the children to help you with some act of service for him. When he walks in the door, join the children in shouting surprise, "We love you," then share your act of service. Number 5, what one act of service has your spouse nagged about consistently? Why not decide to see the negative as a tag? Your spouse is tagging this as really important to him or her. If you choose to do it as an expression of love, is worth more than 1,000 roses. Number 6. If your request to your mate come across his nags or put downs, try writing them in words that would be less offensive to them. Number 7, perform a major act of service like organizing the home office, and then post a sign that reads to your spouse's name with love and sign your name. Number 8. If you have more money than time, hire someone to do the acts of service that you know your spouse would like for you to do, such as the yard work or a once-a-month deep cleaning of your home. Number 9, ask your spouse to tell you the daily acts of service that would really speak love to him or her. Seek to work these into your daily schedule. Little things really do mean a lot. Chapter 8. Love language number 5. Physical touch. We have long known that physical touch is a way of communicating emotional love. Numerous research projects in the area of child development have reached that conclusion. Babies who are held, hugged and kissed develop a healthier emotional life than those who are left for long periods of time without physical contact. Physical touch is also a powerful vehicle for communicating marital love. Holding hands, kissing, embracing, and sexual intercourse are all ways of communicating emotional love to one's spouse. The power of touch of the 5 senses touching, unlike the other 4, is not limited to one localized area of the body. Tiny tactile receptors are located throughout the body. When those receptors are touched or pressed, nerves carry impulses to the brain. The brain interprets these impulses, and we perceive that the thing that touched us is warm or cold, hard or soft. It causes pain or pleasure. We may also interpret it as loving or hostile. Your spouse may find some touches uncomfortable or irritating. To insist on continuing those touches is to communicate the opposite of love. It is saying that you are not sensitive to her needs and that you care little about her perceptions of what is pleasant. Don't make the mistake of believing that the touch that brings pleasure to you will also bring pleasure to her. Love touches may be explicit and demand your full attention, such as in a back rub or sexual foreplay culminating in intercourse. On the other hand, love touches may be implicit and require only a moment, such as putting your hand on his shoulder as you pour a cup of coffee or rubbing your body against him as you pass in the kitchen. Explicit love touches obviously take more time, not only in actual touching, but in developing your understanding of how to communicate love to your spouse this way. If sexual intercourse is your mate's primary dialect, reading about and discussing the art of sexual lovemaking will enhance your expression of love. Implicit love touches require little time but much thought, especially if physical touch is not your primary love language. And if you did not grow up in a touching family sitting close to each other as you watch your favorite television program, requires no additional time, but may communicate your love loudly. Touching your spouse as you walk through the room where he is sitting takes only a moment. Touching each other when you leave the house and again when you return may involve only a brief kiss or hug, but will speak volumes to your spouse. The body is for touching. Whatever there is of me resides in my body. To touch my body is to touch me. To withdraw from my body is to distance yourself from me emotionally. In our society, shaking hands is a way of communicating openness and social closeness to another individual. Crisis and physical touch. Almost instinctively in a time of crisis, we hug one another. Why? Because physical touch is a powerful communicator of love. In a time of crisis, more than anything, we need to feel loved. We cannot always change events, but we can survive if we feel loved. If your spouse's primary love language is physical touch, nothing is more important than holding her as she cries. Your words may mean little, but your physical touch will communicate that you care. Crises provide a unique opportunity for expressing love. Your tender touches will be remembered long after the crisis has passed. Your failure to touch may never be forgotten. If your spouse's love language is physical touch, let me give you some suggestions. Number 1, as you walk from the car to go shopping, reach out and hold your spouse's hand. Number 2, while eating together, let your knee or foot drift over and touch your spouse. Number 3, walk up to your spouse and say, "Have I told you lately that I love you?" Take her in your arms and hug her while you rub her back and continue, "You are the greatest." Number 4, while your spouse is seated, walk up behind her and give her a shoulder massage. Number 5, when you sit together in church, when the minister calls for prayer, reach over and hold your spouse's hand. Number 6, initiate sex by giving your spouse a foot massage. Number 7, when family or friends are visiting, touch your spouse in their presence. Number 8, when your spouse arrives at home, meet him or her one step earlier than usual and give your mate a big welcome home. Chapter 9. Discovering your primary love language. Discovering the primary love language of your spouse is essential if you are to keep their emotional love tank full. How do you know? What is your primary love language? What makes you feel most loved by your spouse? What do you desire above all else? If the answer to those questions does not leap to your mind immediately, perhaps it will help to look at the negative use of love languages. What does your spouse do or say or fail to do or say that hurts you deeply? If, for example, your deepest pain is the critical judgmental words of your spouse, then perhaps your love language is words of affirmation. If your primary love language is used negatively by your spouse, that is, he does the opposite. It will hurt you more deeply than it would hurt someone else, because not only is he neglecting to speak your primary love language, but he is also actually using that language as a knife to your heart. Another way to discover your primary love language is to examine what you do or say to express love to your spouse. Chances are what you are doing for her is what you wish she would do for you. If you are constantly doing acts of service for your spouse, perhaps although not always, that is your love language. If words of affirmation speak love to you, chances are you will use them in speaking love to your spouse. Thus, you might discover your own love language by asking how I consciously express my love to my spouse. But remember, that approach is only a possible clue to your love language. It is not an absolute indicator. For example, the husband who learned from his father to express love to his wife by giving her nice gifts expresses his love to his wife by doing what his father did. Yet receiving gifts is not his primary love language, he is simply doing what he was trained to do by his father. Once you've shared that information, I suggest that you play the following game 3 times a week for 3 weeks. The game is called Tank Tick. And it is played like this. When you come home, one of you says to the other on a scale of 0 to 10. How is your love tank tonight? 0 means empty. 10 means I am full of love and can't handle any more. Your spouse says, what could I do to help fill it? Then you make a suggestion, something you would like your spouse to do or say that evening. To the best of his ability, he will respond to your request. Then you ask your spouse the same questions in the reverse order so that both of you have the opportunity to do a reading on your love tank and to make a suggestion toward filling it. If you play the game for 3 weeks, you will be hooked on it. And it can be a playful way of stimulating love expressions in your marriage. Chapter 10. Love is a choice. How can we speak each other's love language when we are full of hurt, anger and resentment over past failures? The answer to that question lies in the essential nature of our humanity. We are creatures of choice. That means that we have the capacity to make poor choices, which all of us have done. We have spoken critical words. We have done hurtful things. We're not proud of those choices, although they may have seemed justified at the moment. Love doesn't erase the past, but it makes the future different. When we choose active expressions of love and the primary love language of our spouse, we create an emotional climate where we can deal with our past conflicts and failures. Most of us do many things each day that do not come naturally for us. For some of us that is getting out of bed in the morning, we go against our feelings and get out of bed. Why? Because we believe there's something worthwhile to do that day. And normally before the day is over, we feel good about having gotten up. Our actions precede our emotions. The same is true with love. We discover the primary love language of our spouse, and we choose to speak it whether or not it is natural for us. We are not claiming to have warm, excited feelings. We are simply choosing to do it for his or her benefit. We want to meet our spouse's emotional need, and we reach out to speak his love language. In so doing, his emotional love tank is filled, and chances are he will reciprocate and speak our language. When he does, our emotions return, and our love tank begins to feel love as a choice, and either partner can start the process today. Chapter 11. Love makes the difference. Love is not our only emotional need. Psychologists have observed that among our basic needs are the need for security, self-worth and significance. Love, however, interfaces with all of those. If I feel loved by my spouse, I can relax knowing that my lover will do me no ill. I feel secure in her presence. I might face many uncertainties in my vocation. I may have enemies in other areas of my life, but with my spouse I feel secure. I am significant because I stand at the apex of the created order. I have the ability to think in abstract terms, communicate my thoughts by words and make decisions. By means of printed or recorded words. I can benefit from the thoughts of those who have preceded me. I can profit from other experiences, though they live in a different age and culture. In the context of marriage, if we do not feel loved, our differences are magnified. We come to view each other as a threat to our happiness. We fight for self-worth and significance, and marriage becomes a battlefield rather than a haven law. Love is not the answer to everything, but it creates a climate of security in which we can seek answers to those things that bother us. In the security of love, a couple can discuss differences without condemnation. Conflicts can be resolved to people who are different can learn to live together in harmony. We discover how to bring out the best in each other. Those are the rewards of love. Chapter 12. Loving the Unlovely. If your marriage is in the serious trouble discussed in this chapter, you need to begin by making a strong commitment of the will to undertake the following experiment. You risk further pain and rejection. But you also stand to regain a healthy and fulfilling marriage. Count the cost, it's worth the attempt. Number 1, ask how you can be a better spouse, and regardless of the other's attitude, act on what he or she tells you. Continue to both seek more input and comply with those wishes with all of your heart, and will assure your spouse that your motives are pure. Number 2, when you receive positive feedback, you know there is progress. Each month make one non-threatening but specific request that is easy for your spouse. Make sure it relates to your primary love language and will help replenish your empty tank. Number 3, when your spouse responds and meet your need, you will be able to react with not only your will, but your emotions as well. Without overreacting, continue positive feedback and affirmation of your spouse at those times. Number 4, as your marriage begins to truly heal and grow deeper, make sure you don't rest on your laurels and forget your spouse's love language and daily needs. You're on the road to your dreams. So, stay there. Put appointments into your schedule to assess together how you're doing. Chapter 13. The Personal Word. We each come to marriage with a different personality and history. We bring emotional baggage into our marriage relationship. We come with different expectations, different ways of approaching things, and different opinions about what matters in life. In a healthy marriage, that variety of perspectives must be processed. We need not agree on everything. But we must find a way to handle our differences so that they do not become divisive. With empty love tanks. Couples tend to argue and withdraw, and some may tend to be violent verbally or physically in their arguments. But when the love tank is full, we create a climate of friendliness. A climate that seeks to understand, that is willing to allow differences and to negotiate problems. I am convinced that no single area of marriage affects the rest of marriage as much as meeting the emotional need for love. I dream of a day when the potential of the married couples in this country can be unleashed for the good of humankind. When husbands and wives can live life with fully emotional love tanks and reach out to accomplish their potential as individuals and as couples. I dream of a day when children can grow up in homes filled with love and security, where children's developing energies can be channeled to learning and serving rather than seeking the love they did not receive at home. It is my desire that this brief volume will kindle the flame of love in your marriage and in the marriages of thousands of other couples like you for frequently asked questions about the 5 love languages. Question number 1. What if I cannot discover my primary love language? I've taken the love language profile, and less scores come out almost even except for receiving gifts. I know that is not my primary love language. In the book, I discuss 3 approaches to discovering your love language. First, observe how you most often express love to others. If you are regularly doing acts of service for others, this may be your love language. If you are consistently verbally affirming people, then words of affirmation are likely your love language. Second, what do you complain about most often when you say to your spouse, "I don't think you would ever touch me if I did not initiate it"? You are revealing that physical touch is your love language. When your spouse goes on a business trip and you say, "You didn't bring me anything," you are indicating that receiving gifts is your love language. The statement, "We don't ever spend time together," indicates the love language of quality time. Your complaints reveal your inner desires. If you have difficulty remembering what you complain about most often, I suggest you ask your spouse. Chances are they will know. Third, what do you request of your spouse most often? If you're saying, "Would you give me a back rub?" you were asking for physical touch. Do you think we could get a weekend away this month? Is a request for quality time. Would it be possible for you to mow the grass this afternoon? Expresses your desire for acts of service. Your answer to these 3 questions will likely reveal your primary love language. One husband told me that he discovered his love language by simply following the process of elimination. He knew that receiving gifts was not his language. So that left only 4. He asked himself, if I had to give up one of the 4, which one would I give up? First. His answer was quality time. Of the 3 remaining, if I had to give up another, which one would I give up? He concluded that apart from sexual intercourse, he would give up physical touch. He could get along without the pants and hugs and holding hands. This left acts of service and words of affirmation. While he appreciated the things his wife did for him, he knew that her affirming words were really what gave him life. He could go a whole day on a positive comment from her. Thus, words of affirmation were his primary love language and acts of service his secondary love language. Question number 2, what if I cannot discover my spouse's love language? My husband hasn't read the book, but we have discussed the love languages. He says that he doesn't know what his love language is. Though our spouse's complaints normally irritate us, they are actually giving us valuable information. If a spouse says we don't ever spend time together, you may be tempted to say, what you mean, we went to dinner last Thursday night? Such a defensive statement will end the conversation. However, if you respond, what would you like for us to do? You will likely get an answer. The complaints of your spouse are the most powerful indicators of their primary love language. Question number 3. Does your love language change as you get older? I think that our primary love language tends to stay with us for a lifetime. It is like many other personality traits that develop early and remain consistent. For example, a highly organized person was likely organized as a child. A person who is more laid back and relaxed likely had that trait as a child. This is true of numerous personality traits. However, there are certain situations in life that make the other love languages extremely attractive. For example, your primary love language may be words of affirmation. But if you are the mother of 3 preschool children, then acts of service by your husband may become extremely attractive to you. If he gives you only words of affirmation and does not offer to help you with household responsibilities, you may begin to feel, I'm tired of hearing you say I love you when you never lift a hand to help me. Question number 4, does the 5 love languages concept work with children? Most definitely. One of the points we make in the book is that children need to learn how to receive and give love in all 5 languages. This produces an emotionally healthy adult. Thus, parents are encouraged to give heavy doses of the child's primary love language, then sprinkle in the other 4 regularly. When the child receives love in all 5 languages, he or she will eventually learn how to give love in all 5 languages. Question number 5, do children's love languages change when they get to be teenagers? The parent said, I've read your and Dr. Campbell's book on the 5 love languages of children. It really helped us in raising our children. However, now our son has become a teenager. We're doing the same things we've always done, but it doesn't seem to be working. I'm wondering if his love language has changed. I do not believe their child's love language changes at the age of 13. However, you must learn new ways to express the child's primary love language. Whatever you have been doing in the past, the teenager considers to be childish and will want nothing to do with it. If the teen's love language is physical touch and you have been hugging and kissing on the cheek, the teenager may well push you away and say, leave me alone. It does not mean that he does not need physical touch. It means that he considers those particular touches to be childish. You must now speak physical touch in more adult dialects, such as an elbow to the side, a fist to the shoulder. A pat on the back, arm wrestle the teen to the floor. These touches will communicate your love to a teenager. The worst thing you can do to a teenager whose love language is physical touch is to withdraw when the teen says, don't touch me. Question number 6. What if the primary love language of your spouse is difficult for you? As one life said, I did not grow up in a touching family, and now I have discovered that my spouse's love language is physical touch. Is extremely difficult for me to initiate physical touch. The good news is that all of the 5 love languages can be learned. It is true that most of us grew up speaking only 1 or 2 of the love languages. These will come natural for us and will be relatively easy. The others must be learned. Question number 7. Are some of the love languages found more among women and others with men? I have never done the research to discover if the love languages are gender slanted. It may be true that more men have physical touch and words of affirmation as their love language, and more women have quality time and gifts. But I don't know if that is true. I prefer to deal with the love languages as being gender neutral. I do know that any one of these languages can be the primary love language, oh man, or the primary love language of a woman. The important thing in marriage is that you discover the primary and secondary love languages of your spouse, and you speak these regularly. If you do this, you will create a healthy emotional climate for marital growth. Question number 8. How did you discover the 5 love languages? In the book I share some of my encounters with couples through the years that brought me to realize that what makes one person feel love does not necessarily make another person feel love. For a number of years, I had been helping couples in the counseling office discover what their spouse desired in order to feel loved. Eventually, I began to see a pattern in their responses. Therefore, I decided to read the notes. I had made over 12 years of counseling couples and asked myself the question, when someone sat in my office and said, "I feel like my spouse doesn't love me." Why did they want? Their answers fell into 5 categories. I later called them the 5 love languages. I then started sharing these languages in workshops and study groups. Every time I shared the concept of the love languages, the lights came on for couples, and they realized why they had been missing each other emotionally. Question number 9. Do the love languages work in other cultures? Since my academic background is anthropology, this was my question when the Spanish publisher first came and requested permission to translate and publish the book in Spanish. I initially said, I don't know if this concept works in Spanish. I discovered it in the Anglo setting. The publisher said, we have read the book and it works in Spanish. So, I was glad to know the book was to be translated and published in Spanish. Then came the French edition, the German, the Dutch and so forth. In almost every culture, the book has become the bestseller of the publisher. Question number 10. Why do you think the 5 love languages has been so successful? I believe that our deepest emotional need is the need to feel loved. If we are married, the person we would most like to love us is our spouse. If we feel loved by our spouse, the whole world is bright and life is wonderful. On the other hand, if you feel rejected or ignored, the world begins to look dark. Most couples get married when they still have the euphoric feelings of being in love. When the euphoric feelings evaporate sometime after the wedding, and their differences begin to emerge, they often find themselves in conflict. With no positive plan for resolving conflicts. They often find themselves speaking harshly to each other. Harsh words create feelings of hurt, disappointment and anger. Not only do they feel unloved, but they also begin to resent each other. When the couples read the 5 love languages, they discover why they lost the romantic feelings of courtship and how emotional love can be rekindled in their relationship. Once they begin speaking each other's primary love language, they're surprised to see how quickly their emotions turn positive. With the full of time, they can now process their conflicts in a much more positive manner and find resolutions that are workable. The rebirth of emotional love creates a positive emotional climate between the two of them. And they learn to work together as a team, encouraging, supporting and helping each other reach meaningful goals. Question number 11. What if I speak my spouse's love language? And they don't respond? My husband would not read the book. So, I decided to speak his love language and see what would happen. Nothing happened. He didn't even acknowledge that I was doing anything differently. How long am I supposed to continue speaking his love language when there is no response? I know that it can become discouraging when you feel that you are investing in the marriage and receiving nothing in return. There are 2 possibilities as to why your husband is not responding. First and most likely, if you are speaking the wrong love language, wives often assume that their husband's love language is physical touch. Therefore, they make significant changes in the way they respond to their husband's sexual desires. Often, they will initiate sexual intercourse. She is sincerely trying to speak his love language. When he does not so much as acknowledge her efforts, she becomes discouraged. In reality, his love language may be words of affirmation, because she feels no love coming from him. She may be verbally critical of him. Her critical words are like daggers to his heart, so he withdraws from her. His only pleasure in the marriage is those moments of sexual intimacy, but they are not enough to alleviate the emotional sense of rejection he feels from her critical words. He suffers in silence, while she becomes frustrated that her efforts for improving the marriage are unsuccessful. The problem is not her sincerity. The problem is that she is actually speaking the wrong love language. The best approach you can take is to continue to speak their love language on a regular basis. No matter how they treat you. Set yourself a goal of 6 months, 9 months or a year. Your attitude is, whatever their response, I'm going to love them, and their love language over the long haul. Question number 12. Can love to be reborn after sexual infidelity? Nothing devastates marital intimacy more than sexual unfaithfulness. Sexual intercourse is a bonding experience. It unites two people in the deepest possible manner. All cultures have a public wedding ceremony and a private consummation of the marriage and sexual intercourse. Sex is designed to be the unique expression of our commitment to each other for a lifetime. When this commitment is broken, it is devastating to the marriage. However, this does not mean that the marriage is destined for divorce. If the offending party is willing to break off the extramarital involvement and do the hard work of rebuilding the marriage, there can be genuine restoration. In my own counseling, I have seen scores of couples who have experienced healing after sexual infidelity. Question number 13. What do you do when your spouse refuses to speak your love language even when they know it? Let me begin by saying that we cannot make our spouse speak our love language. Love is a choice. We can request love, but we cannot demand love. Having said that, let me suggest the reasons why your wife may not be speaking your love language. She may have grown up in a home where she received few positive words. Her parents were perhaps very critical of her. Thus, she did not have a positive role model of speaking words of affirmation. Such words may be very difficult for her to speak. It will require effort on her part and patience on your part as she learns to speak a language that is foreign to her. Question number 14. Can emotional love return? When it has been gone? For 30 years, I realized that we had failed to speak each other's love language through the years. I gave the book to my wife and asked if she would read it and tell me what she thought of it. 2 weeks later, she said, I read the book. What did you think about it? I said, I think if we had had that book 30 years ago, our marriage would have been very different. I said to her, that's the same thought I had. Do you think it would make any difference if we tried now? She responded, we don't have anything to lose. Does that mean you're willing to try? I asked. Sure. I'll try. She said, we discussed our primary love languages and agreed that we would try to speak each other's language at least once a week and see what would happen. If anyone had told me that in 2 months, I would have loved feelings for her again. I would never have believed it, but I did. Expressing love